A lot of people have asked me, um, what I think of this article, what I think of that article, what I think of the timeline and chloroquine, and there's just so much going on, and when I'm going to be coming out with my log. And I think the feeling is that it would be kind of good for humanity if I did something now, but I don't think that would be good for humanity. So that kind of brings me um, to this Periscope. I thought it'd be a really good time for me to say why I don't think it would be good and why I'm holding off until late 2021, early 2022. And then, because what I've done is so comprehensive, there is no expedient way to tell the story, right? There's just no easy way to tell it. And I've tried to do kind of I guess an elevator pitch, right? Because I come out of sales, so I've tried to compress the thing into something that's easy. It's digestible, and it's not possible, right? My best way of summarizing what's going on right now is this is the fastest roll up of power in history. Really remarkable, and I think my best contribution to humanity, right, is to be the chronicler of what's going on. So I think of this kind of as that period when it went from the Macedonian Empire, right, Alexander the Great, who's another one of my heroes. I love that guy. That guy's amazing. From Alexander the Great to the rise of the Roman Empire, and how that occurred, and how all of what was achieved under Alexander the Great became transferred over to the Roman growing empire, because it happened kind of leaps and bounds, and that happened over, I suppose, 100 or so years. Depends on when you want to start the clock. I cannot present a timeline to this right now, because where should the timeline begin? Does it begin in mid-December? Does it begin November 17th? Does it begin January 2nd when China first mapped? Does it begin December 31st when Taiwan sent out the email? Or does it begin much earlier? Because I'm also focused on what occurred much earlier. And one of the interesting things, and I've discussed this with a lot of people, and I've tested a lot of people, because it's really interesting to get inside people's minds, right? And sometimes I don't want to leave. I want to stay there. So it's really interesting, because if you take a look, so one of the things I did within my own timeline is I looked at probably about 2 years preceding. And I think some people on Twitter might recall that I was asking people for all the scandals that they could recall that Trump was that the media really emphasized, and everything was breaking news. It was breaking news with Stormy Daniels. It was endless, and I was going to bring them down. And then this, and then there was Iran. So I within my daily log, I'm trying to capture all that. And I'm not, in those instances, I'm really not trying to chronicle them or write them up. I'm trying to observe a pattern, right? And the pattern is very episodic. It goes like this. So you'll see one story, let's say Stormy Daniels, and you'll see it pop, where that's just the absolute leading story, and everything else. And I've mapped some of the articles. It's ridiculous. And some of you were, I call it fake reality, real news. And it's a really interesting thing when you take a look at all the body of stories that are coming out, and the way something can be true today. Chloroquine is true today, or it doesn't have to be true tomorrow. None of the news has to be, the only time that news has to be true is as it hits your cognitive senses, because once it hits your frontal lobe, it is true. You may not acknowledge that it's true. There's a lot of things that are going on, but even the amount of kind of real estate that it's taking up in your brain, in a way, makes it true. And the amount of effort required to combat whether it's not true or not is exhausting, right? It's exhausting. So as I think everybody has realized, and I think, politically, both sides of any camp, right, are just emotionally exhausted, and there's just no reservoir left that anybody has, which makes them particularly vulnerable to a lockdown, to a quarantine. So I'm skipping around a little bit in this. So within, again, going into an elevator and trying to describe this to people. So I've said it's the fastest roll up in history. I've also compared it to Dark City, because something I thought since the day the quarantine was announced, or the days in advance of the quarantine, was that this is Dark City. I think that's really interesting. So it's Dark City because who I am today. The world is changing around me, and as I'm locked into my house, and I'm not locked in here right now. I can leave if I want, but so as I'm in my house. When I leave, it's a different world. And every time I leave, it's not just superficially different, which, they out here, all the cafes have to be outdoors and nothing's going on inside, and they have to wear the face mask and the whole thing. So those are the superficial things. And it's not just anecdotally, the world has changed, where I'll see a homeless person here more regularly than I would see other, homeless people. And kind of those anecdotal type of things. I think the streets are a little bit dirtier. But what's really happening, so now I've said it's the fastest roll-up of power in human history, and hopefully people have a bit of a sense more of what I mean by that. I've also said it's Dark City. So in Dark City, in the sense that the world is changing while we're locked into our house. And the superficial differences are just kind of rearranging, rearranging the restaurant designs and all these other type of things. But I'm trying to chronicle also the things that can't be so easily observed, which is, the Constitution, and how we're seeing, and I know I've discussed this before, and I like discussing it, is how we're seeing kind of the Constitution being displaced, and what has already been swapped in. So I got bad news for you. We're already here. Is in terms of service. People like to say he's keeping receipts or something, or whatever the phrase is about keeping receipts. I've got a lot of receipts. I download everything. So if you ever saw a video of people in China trembling, like spontaneously collapsing, they spontaneously tremble and then kind of disappear. I've got that downloaded because these things disappear. The links disappear, the 404, everything gets 404. So I've had to download all of this. And I've also had to do kind of this comparative science of the articles before they got updated and before the language was changed. And a lot of them don't tell you that the language was changed. They don't care. So every timeline that I've gone over, and because I've wanted to include any new information within my own timelines, I want them to be as complete as I can. I face a new battle, and the new battle is that those timelines all begin now in February. All the timelines that I've seen, even the ones that are coming out of Europe, begin in February. They begin, actually, most of them begin, I would say, in mid-January. And they seem to miss all the failures of China, which I could talk about at length, but I'm not going to bore anybody with this one. But I promise you, I'll do a continuation if you're interested, where I can get more into kind of the precision of what I'm discussing. But the timelines that I've seen in Washington Post, New York Times, National Review, whatever I look at, I mean, I look for all of these kind of rigorously. I'm looking for all these things. All now fail to have any. There's no history before, I would say, mid-January. Nothing happened before then. So, there's no longer a China as a culprit. There's no longer a World Health Organization that had extreme failures in what's called the IHR, which is the regulations that were created in 2005, international health regulations, and there is no mention of the violations both from China and their failure to notify World Health Organization, but there's also no mention of the failures of the World Health Organization, which have been completely documented. These things are not my own kind of fabrication. So I've had to make everything I'm doing pristine. I've had to make it unquestionably true. and that could withstand any type of harsh interrogation. So a lot of the timelines I'm looking at now, which I would love to rebut, but it would be fruitless, are things I'm seeing out of New York Times. I'll look at them all the time, and I'll see their history begins after the Chinese New Year. It's really interesting. I've never thought about that before, but it really does begin after the kind of the Chinese New Year, and they try and create this perception of the failures of the Trump administration, which I also don't really want to challenge them or defend them right now, because I don't want to have that emotional attachment. These things are out of my control. I just want to chronicle the failures right now of the news in this instance, because this is its own kind of thing, a little chapter, let's call it. In this instance, it's failures and it's erasure of anything that happened before mid-January. And I can tell you there was a lot that happened in mid-January. There is not as much gaps in information as you might think. There's actually a lot of documentation. There was, and a lot has been confirmed. So, I can tell you December 27th, they had already kind of confirmed that it was SARS because the lab results came back in China. There's also kind of this, I don't want to call it a lie, because I don't think these agencies are explicitly lying. I think what they're doing is deliberately sowing confusion. So I think that one instance I can give you is there's, and it's been kind of diffused and propagated through our own media, which is horrible when we're suffering this, but is that China, People's Republic of China, notified the World Health Organization. And I see that all the time. And it's even within the timeline. But China, they'll say something very tricky, and I'll walk you through it right now. They'll say something like, we were, World Health Organization will say kind of, adamantly, I'm pounding my fist on something like that, okay? So they'll say, we were notified by China, right? Or we were notified within China. Actually, lately, they've come up with a new one. They'll say we were notified by Wuhan, right? Now, that is kind of true, but it's actually mostly not true, right? So if I was one of those snoops, whatever they call that, Snopes, or PolitiFact type of thing, I don't know how I would rate that, because what happened is that the World Health Organization found out through an American log that was created that observes where doctors go into and they post viruses that are going out and epidemics that are going on and a whole bunch of other things. And China saw that. The World Health Organization saw that. They inquired. They asked their office at the in Wuhan to inquire to the CDC, because China has its own CDC, and that agency on December 31st, which was not the People's Republic of China, are the ones who notified the World Health Organization. So if you can see, it's a little bit. They were notified by China, but they were notified within China in Wuhan, but they were not notified by the People's Republic of China. They were notified by this agency within it, which was the World Health Organization. They were also notified by Taiwan on December 31st, and there was also observation that they were censoring social media throughout China. They were censoring their own social media to withdraw any mentions of labs, to withdraw any mention of Wuhan or the flu or anything else. So there's been no prosecution of what's gone on in China. So again, I am posed with a problem, is that I would like to kind of contribute to reality. But right now I'm combating fake reality, real news. I'm combating a media. I'm having to compete with a media that is demanding your entire frontal lobe. They want to have possession of. Well, I don't know. I'm trying not to speculate on anything, because I think that interferes with I'm trying to remove myself subjectively as much as I can and preserve myself as a disembodied intellect. And I think that if I go on a speculative tangent, then I'm guilty of the same thing that I've described to others about that postcard. Right. So if I attach myself too much to it, then I'm living in that postcard, and I'm looking at the Eiffel Tower and I'm creating the universe around it, whether that is a real universe or whether that's the real, grounds that the Eiffel Tower is on or not. I'm kind of fictionalizing it, and I'm trying to get away from that. So I think March 11th was a very interesting date because it's when kind of the world became aware of it. And I think it was March 16th that Imperial came out with their study that shocked the world, and then I've got all those news. Canada just talks about cases, not mortality. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting use of words, and again, I would describe it as confusion, and how that's infused into us, whether it's deliberate or not, or people can kind of, and a lot of ambiguity and kind of a lot of tricks with words. So one of the things I described to Matilda, and thank you so much for being here, and we were talking about, I think it was via DM or I don't remember, but was that, when I go over the forensics of these articles in the Washington Post, and pretty much all of them, they're all basically saying the same thing. They're all getting fed from the same AP Newswire, whatever it is that they'll have 40 paragraphs that I would be delighted to debunk. It's just not the right time. But they'll have, of an article with 41 paragraphs, they'll have 40 paragraphs that's just, I don't want to say not true, but arguable. Let's just say that, arguable. But then they'll have one that's, I think, is very accurate. So in 40 paragraphs, part of my burden is to find that one that's true. And then, it's interesting when I find that one that's true, because I wonder if it was the writer that somehow inserted that and hope he could slip it, or she could slip it, or Zer, whatever, could slip it past their boss, and they could be kind of like this Renaissance artist slipping in all these messages and these kind of coded things that only an intellectual would be able to pick up on. So is that writer trying to slip something in? I don't know. I just think that it's admirable sometimes when I can find 40 paragraphs of obfuscations and misrepresentations, and then I'm so relieved when I find one paragraph of truth. Because as I said earlier, while the politicians were retreating from their electorate, right, they were very unresponsive. I can call Nancy Pelosi if I want to, but I've had the money, and I have the kind of, I've done it for, they're just going to look me up and say, has he ever contributed to the Democratic Party? How much? Was he ever bundled for something? But for most people, they don't have any proximity anymore, any relationship with their state senators, with their Congress people. They have no proximity. But the megacorps do, right? They're much more immediately responsive to their end users. If you have an issue with Amazon, Amazon will resolve it. So Amazon becomes both sides of the marketplace, which is also very upsetting, because you have to now mediate everything. It's now their legal system we're using. We've now abandoned our own legal system for resolving these disputes, and we now have relied on Amazon. And people think that's a good thing. Perhaps it is, because our system was working so inefficiently. Whether that was deliberate or not, I don't know. But these megacorps are spending, Farmers is spending $20 billion this year on ads. Was it 20? Or I don't want to misstate the number, because then somebody's going to say, it's mistaken. I think the number was 20 billion. I'm not going to look it up right now. Actually, to avoid any type of aggravation, I'm going to say 10 billion, and then I can be surprised to the upside, right? So I think it was, I'm going to say 10 billion on ads this year in America alone. That's only on ads. They're going to be spending billions of dollars more on doctor-patient groups. That happens a lot on Facebook groups, and other people are probably more of an authority. Look at me, I'm sweating here. Wow. So Farmers spending $10 billion this year on ads, and Russia only spent $10,000. So what type of influence is the pharma buying? And what is the relationship being between not letting me out of my house? Well, I can get out of my house, but I can't go too far. And the pharma industry. And now the pharma industry is really pushing the daily test and these other type of things that they want people to take several of these actually a day. And they have some kind of, they do have some purposes though. But these tests fall well below regulations and are self-certifying. We've got the deep state, but it's not who we think we are. We've got, these megacorps, and they're winning all the battles. So I think the only way, my only resistance that I can offer is my chronicle of this, is my log. So again, I want to get to a question or two. I've talked so much. Who is Amazon's biggest company? Um, who is Amazon's biggest competitor? I would say is the United States. Amazon is a country, and we are competing with them. So they've got first world propaganda. I mean, they at this point they are a country. Um, who is spending? I watch for who is spending money on advertising. Yeah, so it's not just the money that they're spending on advertising; it's also the amount of lobbying and the amount of complexity that's going into the lobbying. And I'm very familiar with um, the ACA Act. I was a part of it because of Obamacare and because of my company's TriNet and administrative. So I'm really familiar with this stuff. And lobbying, there's a lot of dirt that goes into lobbying that you don't see. Walmart, somebody wrote Walmart. Perhaps that's as a competitor to Amazon. No, we're well beyond Walmart. Walmart at least paid municipal taxes, right? Walmart had a municipal presence. I could go into the store, right? If I wanted to boycott or if I wanted to picket Walmart, I could just go to their location and have my little sign or something um, and picket them. I can't do that against Amazon. So Amazon, as they have no physical presence in most cities, they have they're like they're like wearing have that cloak of invisibility or something. So they're very difficult to prosecute in terms of their avoidance of taxes and the amount of inversions that they use. There's just so much, and their infiltration of sovereignty, their infiltration of every country with their back end, with them building up their clouds for these countries. They're competing for Saudi Arabia. It's really interesting the amount of infiltration they've done. But again, I want to chronicle it so I can tell the story in a way that one of the interesting things is one of the ways I describe it when I'm in an elevator. This is a good way I've been describing it lately. Is in those movies that you see in the future, and it's megacorps, right? The megacorps own everything, and Honda owns everything, and whatever. It's always like a Japanese company and this company and that company where they own everything, right? And it's their constant surveillance of you, and there's very little presence of any type of country. So you just assume that they are the country, and I call that whatever. In any event, so but the megacorps own everything, right? They own the whole world. Here, this is how that happened. So in those sci-fi movies, there's never like an origin story, like the Wolverine origin story. It just is what it is. So you're entering into a world where that's already happened. You're entering into a world where you're arriving at the planet of the apes, and I'm trying to now backfill. And so what we're seeing is how those megacorps came to being and how they displaced sovereign countries, how they displaced territorial sovereignty, right, with functional sovereignty, how they displaced our currency, the dollar is always going to be supreme, so whatever, but how they displaced our currency in terms of its usage and its regulation with their own type of Amazon coin or whatever it is. It's going to be really interesting. Really interesting. I'm really excited. Somehow these leaks of people spontaneously dying made their way onto Twitter. I was very suspicious because China is very aggressive on what they call discourse power, which is an actual phrase that has actual meaning. So it's not something I'm just kind of arbitrarily kind of making up that word, that phrase. So it's called discourse power, and it's had those videos. Though had China wanted to not have those shared, Twitter would have shut them down. They would not have existed on social media. So I was wondering how these videos could have leaked out, which also made me suspicious. So do I think the leaks were purposeful? I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to keep away from kind of either making that implication. So I want everybody to understand I'm not, or suggesting any other motives. Perhaps they are. I just think that it was that there were certain peculiarities about them, particularly because having viruses in China is nothing new. They're always wearing masks in China, and the epidemic of SARS is still such a there's still such a residual memory of the SARS epidemic of 2002, 2003, and the failures of the Chinese Communist Party to be honest with the people there. And that's what created what's called the IHR, International Health Regulations, that China and WHO both failed completely. I mean, undeniably failed. That'd be all right. So when will documentaries and database be available? It's going to be a while, because right now the media controls. Somebody asked me, when will the documentaries and it's all of its notes of background to it be available? And right now I'm competing. So the media, I'm going to go with this thought. Okay. So the media, behavioral sciences have advanced a lot. People still think of propaganda as beignets and all these other type of things, and Noam Chomsky and manufacturing consent. We're well beyond manufacturing consent. I mean, that's primitive. I think of that as Paleolithic, and in fact, I used to call these things Paleolithic. We're right now still only in the Mesolithic period. We've got a while to go until we advance into heavier tools. So the behavioral sciences have only been around for a few years, and they, what they are doing is the frontal lobe can only hold a few thoughts at once. It's not, it's perfect in its own way, and it can only hold a few thoughts, 6, let's say 7 thoughts, in its awareness. And so they're very aggressively bombarding your awareness and your cognition and your frontal lobe with whatever they want, and they're not giving you any retreat, right? So it used to be you could kind of get a retreat by watching TV or watching movies or watching sports. They're not permitting a retreat. And what's actually happening in that is they're not allowing your mind to restore to equilibrium. If they were to turn it off for a day, 2 days, your mind would restore to equilibrium. It's just a natural type of thing. It would restore itself. They're not permitting that to happen. So I expect more coliseums, more spectacles at the Coliseum, bigger and bigger and bigger. They're going to flood the place and put in battleships and all the other things that they did back then. It's just going to get bigger and bigger. So hopefully that was kind of interesting. So the only retreat that we have left for me is the log I'm writing, right? And some meditation and music, and whatever. People have to find a retreat because it's being taken away from us. Very helpful to me. So I want to thank everybody for helping me to tell my story and to improve my telling of the story, and hopefully to continue to make it more elegant. So everybody, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'm going to click the button and it's going to end. Thank you, everybody. Bye. Oh, didn't turn it off yet. Let me try that again. Oh, now.